Good morning to everyone. I am, as they were just saying, passionate about the brain. I have discovered through the 7 years of research that I've been doing just how different our brains actually are and how significant those differences are. But in 12 minutes, I can't tell you about all that. But I'd like to set a little bit of context for it and just give you some salient points about the differences in our brain. Just to give you context about myself, I'm a baby boomer from California, from Hollywood actually, and when I was growing up, there was this play that had started actually before I was born. It was a musical called Annie Get Your Gun. And Annie Get Your Gun was about Annie Oakley, who was a true historical figure from the turn of the 20th century. And she was a cowgirl, and she could shoot, she could ride horses, she could do anything the cowboys could do. And they made a musical about her. Now the context that's so interesting is that this was the time when all the women who had been working in the business world and in manufacturing and all areas of work, the work world, during the war, they were told, okay, now go home, raise the babies, be girls again. And the men, so to make space for the men who are returning from the war. So this particular play, I think, really encapsulated a lot of the messages that we as little girls who were born to those men and those women who were returning home, the baby boomers. This is typical of the message that we got during that time, because in Annie Get Your Gun, there's this great song with Annie, this rootin' tootin' little girl, singing to this guy, and the two of them are singing, I can do anything you can do better, I can do anything better than you. Oh no you can't, or yes you can, and it goes back and forth like that. And that's how we were brought up, to think that, yes, I can do anything a guy can do, but I have to do it better than the guy in order to prove myself worthy, in order to really show up in a way that's significant. The end of the play is that the girl decides she has to be very girly in order to get the guy. So the message that we got was this kind of dualistic message. You've got to be just as good as a guy. You've got to compete with men and be just as smart, just as good. You've got to work harder than they do. You've got to be smarter than they are. You've got to outdo them in all ways that they can do. But you also have to be girly if you want to get a guy to like you, to love you, to want to marry you, to give you babies. So that was the kind of dualistic idea that I had growing up. I think there's still huge traces of that all over South Africa and all over the world. And I think it's something that we need to make conscious and think about, because that kind of dualism is to our disadvantage. And what happened to me then is that I got married and I came to live in South Africa very young. I was 21. There was nothing for privileged white women to do except have babies. So I had my two children. I had a boy and a girl, and I had a boy first and then a girl, right? And I realized when I got divorced and I went back to North America, here I was with two children, a mother of two, and I had a boy that I was going to have to raise on my own. And it was a big challenge to me because I wanted to make sure that I didn't try to turn him into a warmed over girl. I had learned from the time he was tiny that he was radically different. He was not the same as me. I remember putting him on my lap, reading him the Richard Scarry Best Word Books Ever book. And he'd sit on my lap and we'd look at the flowers and he'd, yeah, roses, daisies. Then we'd look at the face, and eyes, nose. He was smart, he could do all those things. We got to the tractors and the trucks, boom, his little hands would come down onto the book. And to my boredom, he would want to talk about every single one of those things. So there was no way that he was like me. Not in any way was he going to be like me. He was going to be different. So here I was with this very different boy, as a single mother living back in North America and having to understand him and really make sure that I was supporting his otherness. So I did everything from, taking him to his games and he went out camping. I got him a male mentor or two wonderful men that supported him and helped him and taught him what it was to be a man. I even gave him his first BB gun, which for a baby boomer anti-war activist, it was pretty edgy. But I wanted it to be a symbol of my respect for his otherness, for the fact that he was different from me. And as weird as it was to give him a gun, I felt it was important that I do that. Anyway, as time went on, I got more and more interested in this otherness, this difference between men and women. And I started eventually to study the brain. And one of the things that's interesting about the brain is that structurally the brain is 92% the same. Now that's kind of a rough figure, because how would you measure that? But it's roughly 92% the same, and that means that the differences between the male and female brain structurally have to do with certain parts of the brain that are a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, and that function quite differently because they're bigger or smaller or in a different relationship to other parts of the brain. The 8% that makes all the difference, though, I took my grandchildren up to Neisner, Plettenberg Bay, and I took them to some monkey farm. And the guy was saying, the guy who led us around was saying that the difference between a chimpanzee brain and a human brain is only 8%. So that 8% makes all the difference. I mean, really, if you think about it, it's even the difference between a monkey brain and a human brain. The other huge difference between the male and the female brain is the fact that we use the brain so differently. We use different parts of the brain to do the same thing, to think. We use different parts of the brain to process our emotions, to relate. We use our brains very differently. And I, for one, want to know about those differences. I don't want the gender distinctions that we get from society, from religion, to tell me how I'm supposed to be in the world. I'd much rather know what are the facts. And let me know what the facts are, and let me optimize those facts. Let me take advantage of the differences between us. So for me, the 8% does make all the difference. Now, I want to just show you just two slides that I think are important. As I said, I don't have enough time to tell you all about the differences, but these slides will kind of tell you a lot. There was, just before I finished my thesis, there was this in December of 2013, a report that came out, a wonderful study at the University of Pennsylvania, and it was combined. It had the medical school as well as the psychiatry and psychology departments. They took the same 1,000 people that they were testing, and they gave them fMRIs. The medical school did the scanning, and the psych department and the psychology department did testing, behavioral tests, so that they could then actually see, okay, here's how the brain is different, and here's how we show up in the world. Now, I had just spent 7 years researching all that, and here it comes out in one report. But at least, thank God, everything I'd said was accurate, so I was glad about that. Now just have a look at those brains. This is the male brain. The male brain connects back to front, and the two hemispheres are really quite separate. They do connect, but they connect usually in a subcortical way, underneath the surface. There's a connection between the right and left hemisphere. The female brain connects left to right hemisphere hugely, and has much more cortical, which is where we do our thinking, much more cortical connectivity. Oh, I guess I'm okay. In the brain, which means that the female brain is terrific at thinking. Okay, so don't get it wrong. What this means, though, is that the male brain connecting back to front means that the male brain perceives something and takes action. Okay, and it takes action with accuracy. There was a South African neuroscientist who explained to me that the male brain takes a snapshot of the outer world, processes that, and can move around within the outer world perfectly, or really well. The female brain connects the hemispheres, as I said. That means that it's connecting the analytical part of the brain with the intuitive part of the brain. Okay, so we can think and feel at the same time. we can perceive how other people are thinking and feeling, and we can then communicate. The South African neuroscientist was saying that the thing about the female brain that is remarkable is how it's just designed to communicate. Okay, so the male brain then is great at spatial processing and motor and sensory motor speed. And those are the tests that the psych people did. And the female brain, the psych people found really good at paying attention, at understanding and remembering word and face recognition, and also great at social cognitive tests. Now, duh, doesn't it make sense? But anyway, now science is telling us that. The male brain has more white matter, which means it connects front to back, longer distances in the brain, and also connects better into the body for those physical responses. And the female brain has more gray matter, girls. We've got more gray matter. Okay, now, we finally entered the corporate world in South Africa. In America, it was in the World War II. Here, probably the 1980s, something around there, where women went into the corporate world. But I think it's like we have a visitor's visa. We're allowed to show up there, but we have to be like men, compete with men in their way of being in the corporate world, right? When I'm coaching young women, that's what I hear all the time, that's the problem, is that they're faced with a male-designed workspace, male-designed decision-making processes, and they have to change into guys in order to compete, and they got to do it better than the guys do. Okay, so that's the problem. There's still huge inequality of power and influence. Only 18% of executives in the United States, still to this day, and 18% of executives in South Africa. Okay, that's interesting. In the United States, it's because women lean out, which is the whole topic of that Lean In, Lean Out book. Rare things are done to accommodate women and to retain women. Now, here's the problem. In 2015 in South Africa, we're going to change the laws to say that 50% of corporate executives and business managers are going to have to be women. Now, the feminist in me says, yay, this is terrific. But my knowledge about the way it's going to be is that you're just going to take a whole bunch of new women, put them into corporate positions, elevate them, and they're still going to be having to function like men in the business world. So what we have to do is to lean in and create change. As soon as we get into positions of authority or leadership, we have to lean in, and we've got to make sure that we change the environment to create female-friendly spaces. I did that in my corporate career. We have to learn how to lead like women. There's no way we can just lead like men. In fact, all stats now show that women are better managers of people and processes in the business world than are men. And women, corporations, big studies done, corporations that have women on the board make 26% higher profits than all male boards. Okay, so we're not optional extras. We are essential to the corporate world. And we are the missing element for the 21st century. My last slide. This is, guess who that is? My little boy. That's my son. Hi, Mom, saying as he leans over. Now, if that doesn't say male otherness, nothing does. There's no way you'd catch me up there sitting there like that. And I want to just close by saying one thing about not kidding ourselves into thinking we can turn men into warmed over girls. When he first introduced me to his fiancée, I said to her, don't you think it's great that Kevin can talk about feelings? And he's really good at listening, and he can do all this. Kevin pipes up and he says, yeah, Mom, you taught me I can name my feelings and I can listen and I can do all that, but I hate it just like any other guy. So one of the things that's important is to look at those two brains and to think, are we actually incompatible, or is there a possibility of complementarity? And that's really my message. That magical otherness is designed for complementation, and that's what we have to do in the 21st century. Okay, thank you.